The War of the Roses Part 7, a shaky peace had been established in the country, lasting until 1483. Despite the victory of the Yorkists, many were dissatisfied with their rise to power. Moreover, the situation was exacerbated by the rivalry within the dynasty itself. After the death of Edward IV, his 13-year-old son Edward V came to power. A regency council headed by Richard Gloucester, the brother of the deceased monarch, was formed around the new ruler. He quite soon removed his nephew from power. The coronation did not even take place. Claiming that the new king was illegitimate, Edward was imprisoned together with his younger brother in the Tower. Their further fate remains unknown to this day. The mysterious disappearance of the claimants to the throne from the very beginning was associated with Richard's desire to get rid of his opponents. His short reign was accompanied, on the one hand, by the discontent of the aristocracy in 1483. The Duke of Buckingham rebelled against the king, and on the other hand, by progressive reforms for his time. In 1485, one of the few surviving descendants of the Lancasters, Henry Tudor, landed in Wales with French and Scottish soldiers. The Battle of Bosworth took place on August 22, in which the Yorkists were defeated and King Richard found his death. By the right of the strongest, Henry was crowned in London. The Tudors became the ruling dynasty. However, the Yorkists continued the struggle. The last battle of the War of the Roses took place in 1487. Richard II's nephew, the Earl of Lincoln, rose against the new king, but Henry was able to defend the throne from this encroachment. The Battle of Stokefield, where the Earl of Lincoln was killed, became the final event of the war. The main events of the struggle between the House of Lancaster and the House of York 1455, the uprising of Richard of York, the First Battle of St. Albans, the beginning of the Wars of the Roses. Richard became the heir to King Henry VI. The 30th of December 1460, the Battle of Wakefield, the defeat and death of Richard of York. His son Edward becomes the head of the House of York. 1461, the coronation of Edward IV of York. Edward became the first representative of the House of York to ascend the English throne. After a series of battles, the supporters of Lancaster were defeated, and Henry VI went into hiding. 1464, the betrayal of the Duke of Somerset to Edward IV. The battles of Hexham and Hedgley Moor, the attempt by the supporters of the deposed king to restore him to the throne fails. The first phase of the war ends. 1467, the marriage of the Burgundian Duke Charles the Bold and Margaret of York, the sister of Edward IV. If the Lancastrians were supported by France, the Yorkists decided to draw closer to their opponents from Burgundy. The alliance with Charles strengthened the king's position. 1470, the conspiracy of Richard Neville, the return of Henry VI to the English throne. Edward IV is forced to flee to Burgundy, where he begins to gather his supporters to regain the throne. 1471, Edward Ives' return from Burgundy, the battles of Barnet and Tewkesbury, the restoration of the throne to the House of York. Edward IV managed to defeat his opponents. In one of the battles, Richard Neville was killed. Henry VI was imprisoned in the Tower, where he died under mysterious circumstances, most likely poisoned. Edward IV firmly established himself on the throne and ruled until his death. April 9, 1483. The death of Edward IV, the heir to the deceased king, became his son Edward V. His uncle Richard Gloucester became the regent for the young king. June 22, 1483. The children of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville declared bastards. The young king was imprisoned in the Tower. His fate remains unknown. On July 6, 1483, proclamation of Richard Gloucester as King of England, Gloucester ascended the throne under the name of Richard III. After this, conspiracies against the new king began to mature, in which Elizabeth Woodville also participated. October 1483. The Buckingham Rebellion, the rebel aristocrats in England and Wales planned, according to various versions, to restore Edward V to power or to give the crown to Henry Tudor, the only remaining Lancastrian claimant to the throne. The uprising was crushed and Buckingham was executed. Nevertheless, this uprising showed the precariousness of Richard I's position. August 1, 1485. Henry Tudor's landing at the head of a French-Scottish detachment in Wales. Henry Tudor's appearance in Britain caused many dissatisfied with Richard I's policies to switch to the side of the new claimant. August 22, 1485. The Battle of Bosworth. Richard III met his rival, gathering about 8,000 men. Henry Tudor's forces numbered about 6,000. It is difficult to say who would have won. If it had not been for the betrayal of Lord Stanley, Henry's stepfather, who supported King Richard III, his switch to his stepson's side determined the course of the battle. In the battle, Richard was killed, after which his army fled. January 1486. The wedding of Henry V. Tudor and Elizabeth of York. The wedding became a symbolic act that united the Tudor and Lancaster dynasties. In honor of the reconciliation, Henry adopted a new emblem of the house, the combined red and white roses. June 16, 1487. The Battle of Stokefield, the last battle of the Wars of the Roses. The last surge of confrontation occurred 2 years after Henry Tudor's accession to the throne. A rebellion against him was raised by Richard I's nephew, the Earl of Lincoln. He planned to give the throne to the impostor Lambert Simnel, whom he called his brother. The Battle of Stokefield ended in a convincing victory for King Henry. After these events, nothing threatened his power anymore. The Wars of the Roses were over. Continued in the next part. If you enjoy our videos, please subscribe to the channel, like, and leave a comment if you'd like.